Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing. It's what a great feeling. I was doing the countdown. It's like the ball dropping, waiting for all these huge contract announcements to come forward. But I guess that's actually already happened now, hasn't it?
Well, it's already happened, but you're looking to see if any of these things kind of get taken back. And then I guess guys like Darius Slay, they can officially, and although I haven't seen that has happened yet, but let's kind of get a little refresher on everything. I want to first get your take on the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson situation, because that one kind of hit everybody yesterday. You were not on for Football at 4 yesterday, but now that the dust has settled, there's a lot of interesting things here. Initially it was, okay, well, is this because he's a social media pain in the ass? Is he a pain in the ass in the locker room? Does he make too much money? Is this strictly a money thing? And then that was yesterday. Then later last night, well, the Eagles were apparently interested in a player like Justin Reed, who they would have had to spend real money on at safety. So is this a Chauncey Gardner-Johnson thing? How do you read everything that we now know leading up to the new year on why the Eagles decided to trade Chauncey Gardner-Johnson?
Yeah, first of all, it did catch us a little bit by surprise. We had done an episode on Inside the Birds recently going through potential departures, most notably in free agency, but also any trades. And we couldn't find too many guys that we thought the Eagles could trade without taking an exorbitant cap hit or getting the right value in return. Obviously, if they trade Bryce Huff, they do take a big cap hit on it, but they could do it. But you would understand why. And really, I think in passing, one of us, either me or Adam, said, well, maybe CJ Gardner-Johnson, just because we knew that there was no guarantee, the money was not guaranteed, and you could save a lot of cash on it. But we didn't even spend more than 5 seconds on it. We were, again, because there just aren't that many guys other than Dallas Goedert that we felt would be viable trades for the Eagles. But this trade was made, and I sent you, as a joke, a text yesterday. I don't know if you saw the last text I sent you, but it was the Wu-Tang Clan's cash rules everything around me. Cream. That's what it's all about, Mike. Cash. And this is one of the things that Adam and I are really proud of on Inside the Birds, being able to help people really try as best as we can to understand things that are complicated. But the Eagles do not operate, as we all know, on salary cap terms. They operate on cash terms. The cap they manipulate by giving players cash option bonuses and cash up front, and then spreading a lot of the actual salary out over the books over long term with void years and dummy years. So yes, it's all about cash. If it was about attitude and behavior, I think I said to you, Oren Burks is the nicest, greatest leader, great guy, and they didn't even pay him $5 million, Mike. So to me, it's not about what he did. There's no smoking gun. I know everybody thinks that there's some other side to the story. I think CJ Gardner-Johnson came out on a podcast himself, and he said, hey, look, when they traded him, they told him it was just a business move that they need to make. They are a cash team, and they are clearly trying to put the cash that they are allotted this year into making sure that now they're not only competitive this year, but also going forward. And I know some people have said, well, why couldn't you have just waited one more year on CJ, because there were still more savings in year two. But I would tell you, Mike, you just can't guarantee that his trade value is going to be there next year. The guy's had a lot of trouble staying healthy, right? And they just got him to play an entire season and be healthy. And, and still we're only able to get, 2 day 3 future picks and a struggling former first rounder. So I'm not quite sure waiting would have helped them solve any of their issues as far as saving cash for this year.
Yeah, that's the thing. They get back a former first-round player in the offensive lineman. And then everybody, of course, is it fair to just assume because Jeff Stoutland gets this guy that Kenyon Green is going to step in and play right guard? Or is this, Chris Long brought up an interesting point on the Greenlight podcast, Jeff. He said he thinks it's a leverage play to try to say, Becton, hey, listen, here's our number. You leave. We got a guy who was you last year, a first-round pick who was struggling where he was. We're okay with moving him here. There's our offer. Go see what you can get.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a leverage play because there's no – if you're going to try to threaten a guy, you're going to bring in somebody who can replace him. And right now, Kenyon Green is a reclamation project. And as much as there's this total and deserved trust in Jeff Stoutland to make things happen, there have been some guys, some former first rounders that Jeff Stoutland magic has not worked on. One is Andre Dillard. Another one is Chance Warmack. Sometimes a player just isn't very good, right? And no matter what kind of coaching you give a guy, he doesn't get it, okay? So, and one thing about Becton is he's just a massive human being. So he played well. I don't want to say he was great this year. I think it really helped him, the environment. He's a great story of development, but it's not like he was an all-pro right guard. I think what they need to do with Kenyon Green is get him at first to play like a functional offensive lineman and then try to work from there. That's not a guarantee.
Right, and one of the things is, hey, last year, people forget, Geoff, Tyler Steen was the starting right guard when they got to training camp. They wanted to push him. They want to bring in competition so that you have to win a job, not just get handed a job.
Exactly. And, the draft, I mean, right now, as you look at it, Steen, I would say, is the leader in the clubhouse without Becton coming back. Green, we'll see what happens if he can push. They drafted Trevor Keegan. He's only been a left guard. We'll see if maybe Stoutland can work some magic there and cross-train him at right guard. Darian Kennard is a guy that played tackle for them last year. But when they signed him, they felt he could be a right guard. He played right guard on the practice squad for the Chiefs his last year there. They're going to draft a guy. They could sign a veteran guy. So, yeah, that's how the hierarchy goes right now.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4. Let's go back to the C.J. Gardner-Johnson thing for a second, because apparently they had interest in a veteran player like Justin Reed. He ended up getting paid some decent money. What do you make of Justin Simmons saying that the Eagles are high on his list? Now, that doesn't mean they're high on their list, but that, hey, I wouldn't mind playing. He mentioned two reasons. One, Vic Fangio. Two, Christian Parker, who people don't probably even know who that is, but he's the secondary coach who was in Denver when Simmons was a two-time Pro Bowler, three-time All-Pro, and you look at him now, the age situation, that's not an exciting deal at this stage of his career, but is that the kind of deal that you could envision them making, or is he just simply going to get too much money elsewhere?
Well, if you're taking Howie Roseman at his word and his actions, his past actions in times like these, coming off Super Bowls when they've had to rebuild, he has said, we have young drafted players that we have to play. Okay, so they've got Reed Blankenship, who I think will get an extension. He's been underpaid, to be honest with you. And they've got Sidney Brown that they drafted in the third round. So if you're going to sign does Justin Simmons want to come to the Eagles on the veteran minimum to fight for a job and potentially be a backup? Or does he want to go somewhere where he can still, if he feels like he's a starting level player, which he probably is, and do that? That I would think B, but you never know. On the podcast, Mike, I was, I don't remember which one it was because we're starting to doing daily pods now, but I once had a chat with Howie Roseman a long time ago about a potential free agent that I knew the Eagles were interested in. Not like an A-level guy, but he was a free agent. And I asked Howie, I said, what do you think of this guy? Is there, I was trying to get a little inside intel. And he said, if he wants to be an Eagle, he'll be an Eagle, which was his language for saying if he's willing to take a lesser deal than somebody else is giving him and fight for a role and maybe, work as well. Yeah, then it can happen. So I say that to say it looks like the Eagles have other plans at safety as far as youth with Reed and with Sidney Brown and this draft coming up. They could certainly get one. I could definitely see them signing a 1-year veteran safety for veteran minimum money, but then it comes down to, well, what does Justin Simmons want?
Well, that's another spot to keep an eye on if you do bring a veteran player in here. So what do you think ends up going down with Darius Slay? Now that, Chauncey's out, there was, do they have a beef? He's not here. Isaiah Rodgers is out. Is it more likely in your mind that Slay is now back?
Well, Isaiah Rodgers made what? I think the report was $8 million guaranteed, correct?
Yes.
I've heard some things, and so has Adam, that might not actually be the full number. Like it might be a little less than that.
Okay.
So if that's what they're willing, let's call it 7. Sure. If 7 is the maximum amount of dollars they're willing to give a corner, I'll ask you, does Darius Slay come back? Does he love being an Eagle and have this 1 year left enough that he's going to play for a $7 million? Is he going to, basically say, it's not, what's the word, like tail between the legs or swallow and bite the bullet and really play at this level for $7 million? That's hard. Now, Brandon Graham's done it, right? But but because he's an edge rusher, they paid him more than $7 million, I think. So we'll see. That it goes back to how bad does he want to be an Eagle? If he wants to play for one of the lowest, contracts that a cornerback is going to make in the NFL, who's starting, and certainly the lowest for someone with his caliber and experience, then it can happen.
Yeah, and, I don't know what do you make? There was a report that the Steelers are going to sign him, which can't happen yet, but I'm imagining, you probably.
Well, I'm imagining that if that report came out, that the Steelers probably made him an offer that was more than $7 million a year or $8 million guaranteed.
Right.
Yeah.
I would imagine that once the Eagles officially release him, and then quickly thereafter, he'll be in Pittsburgh. It seems like. Speaking of in Pittsburgh, Kenny Gainwell's there. That might be a yawner for some people, but can you work Barkley as much as you did last year? And the role that Gainwell had, by the way, the tackle he made in the Super Bowl and special teams is underrated on that kickoff there. He was a special teams player. He blocked, they really liked him.
Yeah, he'll be missed. If you can remember, as far to the first Super Bowl 2017, there was a really key player, like a special teamer / reserve, who was really, really vital, loved by everybody on the team. His name was Steven Means. You may remember him. He was a backup edge. He would get in there every once in a while. I think he blocked a field goal that year. He was just like a hair-on-fire guy, played great special teams. And if you ask people in the locker room, I wrote a huge profile on him not because I wanted to write a Steven Means story, but because people kept telling me how awesome of a teammate and how much he pushes people in practice and how worthy and valuable he was, that even though it doesn't show up on the stat sheet. And there's an element of that with Kenny Gainwell, Mike. He does the little things. You mentioned the special teams acumen he gives you. He can catch the ball fairly well. He's a good pass protecting block. And pass protecting back. So he's good at that. He gives you some power too. He's one of the best short yardage runners in the league, which is weird because it's not how he was used in college. So they have to replace those things, and to ask a second-year running back, Will Shipley, who's a little small, to do all that is a little much. So I imagine that they will look to sign a veteran somewhere, just to have in cash. They already brought Lou Nichols back and signed him to the 53, not even a futures, just to kind of add to the room. And I will assume they will continue to add. Yeah,
it's funny you say it. I assume they'll bring a veteran in here. So let's get into that real quick. How likely is it that they can? It almost seems like everything they're doing is we got to say cash. So then people are having the perception that they can't sign anybody. So can you explain that?
Yeah, no, it's. I'm glad you asked that. I think Adam and I are going to do like a FAQ podcast for tomorrow, like frequently asked questions, because people are all sorts of confused about. We're getting people saying, well, wait, the Eagles only saved like $200,000 on the cap by trading Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. How does that matter? What does that mean?
Yeah, that was a big one. We had people texting in yesterday, like they really didn't save a lot of cash, like $200,000 for a guy who's not even, I think he's 27 or 28 years old.
Yeah, and that's why we keep saying on the podcast, don't look at the cap. Forget cap. It's cash. And there's a reason why a cap number and a cash number are different. And I don't need to go through into that. There's a whole lot of bookkeeping science to that. Just for your listeners to know, the Eagles operate on a cash budget. Jeffrey Lurie gives the team every year, this is how much cash we have to spend. Some years it might be more than others. I believe the Eagles have spent more cash, right, on players year to year than any other team in the league over the past 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
So getting rid of Gardner-Johnson gave them $8.5 million in cash this year, right? So they have guys they need to extend. That when you extend a player's contract, you give him cash up front, right? Excuse me. And then, yes, you're going to bring in a couple of guys, I imagine bargain free agents on 1-year deals. You'll have to give them a little bit of upfront cash, not a ton, but they will spend money. They're not the Marlins. I want everybody to understand.
It's funny. Somebody texted that in. What is this? What are we, the Marlins?
No, it's not like that. But people also have to remember, we do contract episodes for this reason every year, more than once a year on the Eagles, to remind to our listeners that there are several high-priced players on the Eagles right now who are due cash bonuses year after year. And that's why the Eagles have a lot of really good players, because they have these option bonuses.
I'm glad you brought – so yesterday, there was somebody texting in and was basically saying, because we're talking about them trying to save – and he's like, everybody – there's a cap. Everybody spends the same amount of money. And that's not necessarily true. Some people are under the cap, although there is a percentage that you can't go. But the Eagles spend so much more money on signing bonuses and like that kind of stuff.
Yep, they do. So the reason why the Eagles can lose the players that they did, which I know frustrates fans, but then you still look at the team and you say, oh, your quarterback is making like top 10 quarterback money, maybe top 5. I don't know. I forget. There's been a lot of extensions since his, right? Your running back is making top running back money. Your wide receiver is making top wide receiver. Your number 2 wide receiver got an extension. Almost everybody on your offensive line, Landon Dickerson, Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, right? They all got big money and continue to get option bonuses, which comes in the form, that's cash, right? That's why the Eagles have what they have. They have a lot of very good players. So they should still be competitive next year. But you can't, and I'm not the first to say this, you can't put out the type of team you had last year after year after year, whether you're a cash team or a cap team. Do you think the Patriots wanted to trade Tyreek Hill 1 year and then trade L'Jarius Sneed 2 years later and then trade Joe Thuney this year? No, nobody wants to, but when you win with great players, you have to make financial decisions, whether it's cap related or cash related. It all just depends on what your team is. There are some teams that believe in cash and cap being the exact same. So they don't do bonuses and prorations out the wazoo and voidable dummy years. Every year, the cash matches the cap. The Eagles are not like that. But that is why they've been able to assemble some really, really special 53s with some very, very good players.
All right, that's a good breakdown from Geoff Mosher here, Football at 4. Real quick, before we let Moshe out of here, Ben Van Sumeren will be back with the Eagles. Kind of an underrated thing. He played fullback for them last year. When they lost him, they actually brought another fullback in to replace him. So it seems like something that they valued out of him. He also plays linebacker and special teams. So Ben Van Sumeren was a restricted free agent or an exclusive rights free agent where he
might have been an exclusive rights free agent.
Yes, exclusive rights free agent, yes. So he is recovering from ACL. Not anything that anybody should get all that crazy and excited about, but that is just a little bit of note-keeping there. Number 2, former Eagle Javon Hargrave is signing with Minnesota, 2 years, $30 million, $19 million in guarantees. And you're seeing a lot of these teams around the league handing out a lot of money to some players who are on the back end of their careers. And the Eagles are trying to avoid having to count on that level of player. If they're bringing that guy in, Geoff, they'll give that guy a 1-year deal. They don't want to give him multiple years.
That's right. They want to find bargains. They want to find like a Chris Long, a Patrick Robinson, LeGarrette Blount. Who else can I throw into that category? Of course, Long. I'm going with the ones that helped them win a Super Bowl, but obviously they tried that a little bit 2 years ago when they signed Terrell Edmonds and Justin Evans and Zach Cunningham, and it didn't work. And hey, listen, it may not work. I can't sit here and tell you the Eagles are going to be in the Super Bowl next year, but I darn sure can tell you that when the season begins, the Eagles will be looked at as one of the better teams in the NFL.
Well, I was going to say, is it fair to say that this team's not going to be as good this year than they were last year? I mean, I think that's pretty fair.
Let me ask you this: the Chiefs team that won the Super Bowl over the Eagles 3 years ago, right? Was that their best iteration of themselves?
Absolutely not. No, I think the team, and I think the Chiefs
that just went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
that won 15 games was not the best iteration of themselves.
No doubt. And listen, if you stay the same, you're likely to have been worse. If you just didn't, hey, we've retained everybody and we're back and we're the same exact team, other teams are improving. You can't just stay the same. Right. Now, some would say, yeah, but you took a step back. Well, yeah. But if I told you 3 years ago Milton Williams is getting a $26 million contract, you might say you're a nutbag.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's good to look at things in reverse. And I just want to make this abundantly clear. I'm not trying to be a mouthpiece for the organization. I'm not saying everything they're doing is the right move. And you and I are just trying to explain why they do what they do And we can honestly say what they do has led to them being a fairly successful organization, not only over the last 8 years, but really the last 25 years, but really especially over the last 8 to 10, right?
Yes.
So I just want to let everybody understand that. I'm not trying to be a mouthpiece. I'm trying to explain. But if you saw what they did after they went to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago and lost, it was bye-bye Javon Hargrave, bye-bye TJ Edwards, it was bye-bye Kaiser White, it was goodbye Isaac Seumalo. I mean, those are some really, really good players. Seumalo, Hargrave, and Edwards were really, really good players, right?
Yeah.
No doubt?
Yep.
Okay, but in the aftermath, it was extension for Landon Dickerson, extension for there was another player who got a big extension. They gave Bradbury one. It didn't work out, but they had the money to do it, and everybody loved it at the time, right? Slay, they let test the market. Then he came back on some money. They gave A.J. Brown that first extension before they did another one. They got Devontae Smith extended. So if you're a fan of the fact that the Eagles have Landon Dickerson and Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson and all these other players who are still playing for them at a high level under contract and extended and making good money, but not the number one guy at his position, that only happens because you didn't give big cash to the guys that we just mentioned let go. You cannot have it both ways.
Good explanation.
So that is sort of,
Good football at 4 today with Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. So we'll see what ends up happening. Free agency is now official. Anything you see from this point forward, that has actually happened. Everything that happened the first 2 days, that's all a mirage. Today, it's real for reals for reals. And Mosher's back next week for football at 4 here on the Sports Best. Thanks, man.
You got it, man.